So once again, welcome. And today's lecture is on innovation in Korea. And we are in the first half of the course. Over the previous 3 lectures, we've talked about what is innovation, basic definitions, described the biological evolutionary model as the essential framework for understanding innovation. We did some examples from the ancient world and moving on to the Renaissance, Leonardo da Vinci and Michelangelo. And today we're going to do innovation in Korea, history, and also obviously some current contemporary aspects of innovation in Korea. And then the second part of the course, as you know, is the methods and applications of innovation. So here's a discussion question for today. We won't be able to go through everybody, but I'd like a few people to comment, and I will call on you and feel free to answer. Do you think Korea is one of the most innovative countries in the world? Again, this is just a thinking question, a discussion question. There is no right answer, and as we'll see in the lecture, there is a controversy about this. So who would like to suggest some thoughts? How about Su Yun-yang? Su Yun-yang.
Yes.
What do you think?
I think that Korea is one of the most innovative countries.
Okay.
Because there are many, but I think not all industry is innovative. Just we are good at we are innovative for the things that we are good at. We do good. So I think we should be innovative for other industry too.
Great. Very interesting answer. Thank you very much. Obviously, this is a very broad question, and we need to frame it in terms of some sectors or some industries, as you pointed out. And indeed, Korea can be more innovative in some areas than other areas. So that's exactly right. I'm not saying that's the right answer or wrong answer. As I said, there's no right answer, but that's a very good way to look at it, as opposed to some general statement. And also, it's very important to consider the element of time. The question seems to apply today or now, but indeed, what about earlier, 30 years ago or 300 years ago? Was Korea one of the most innovative places? So things can change relative to time. They can change relative to industry as well. Now, one thing I want to mention that's very important is that innovation is kind of like infectious. I'm not talking about COVID, but innovation in one area can influence other areas. And there are 2 reasons for this. One reason, like in Silicon Valley, they have many innovations there, not just one industry. So there are 2 reasons for this infectiousness, if you will. One is, as we'll develop in this course, innovation is not really a theory or a abstract concept per se, but it's more like a mindset. And people's mindsets can influence other people. So if somebody has an innovative mindset, innovative outlook, innovative personality, then other people will be influenced by that. So to the extent that innovation is a general feeling among people and a mindset, that can be infectious. The second reason why innovation is not always confined to one sector is that especially in our fourth industrial revolution, especially in an era in which convergence of technologies increasingly happens, then innovation in one technical area will necessarily influence and be involved in innovation in another technical area. So there's cross communication between sectors. But you're right, in some senses, certain sectors, certain areas of the society will be more or less innovative. Let's call on one more person, and then we'll move to the lecture. Nam Ye-ji. Nam Ye-ji, what do you think of this question and your response?
I think Korea is one of the most innovative countries because there are many novel inventions in Korea, and there are many new products from Korea. So I think Korea is the most innovative country.
Okay, thank you very much. So let's continue. Just a very quick review, innovation in the ancient world and the Renaissance. We talked about Rome as the original open innovator. And by open innovation, as we mentioned, bringing ideas from many different places, many different people, many different sources. And this open innovation philosophy or mindset gave rise to many innovations, such as concrete, newspapers, welfare-bound books, roads, arches, as you can see depicted here, battlefield surgery, and also Roman law, which was a codification that helped enable this open innovation. And of course, as we saw, the Roman Empire became very prevalent throughout Europe, Middle East, and North Africa. And it started as just one of many city-states in Italy. And the question arises, how did this city-state, Rome, the one in red here, eventually prevail over the other city-states? And there are many reasons for this, but I think one of the main ones is that the Romans had a society that was open to outside ideas. And so this open innovation that we mentioned wasn't just a sort of slogan or just an idea. It was a reality for Rome in that they allowed non-Romans to have certain citizenship rights that allowed them to participate in and contribute to the society and bring all these ideas. Whereas the other city-states were more insular and isolated, and they couldn't innovate, whether it be military or other aspects of the society. So they were eventually subsumed by Rome. And one of the themes that we'll talk about throughout the course will be how innovation is essential to success. It's not just a luxury item where we look at it's a nice thing to have. It is actually the essence of how countries, individuals, organizations, companies, empires have succeeded or not succeeded over the course of history. In the later part of the course, we'll review some of this geopolitics. For example, just to look ahead a little bit, we see this situation between China and the United States. A lot of people talk about it as a politics and so forth, trade, but on one level, one can also look at it as an innovation conflict and which innovation approach is going to prevail. And we'll talk about that, but I wanted to mention. So one of the aspects of this Roman law was to create the context for the phenotypic variation that we discussed as the framework, the biological framework for innovation. The biological framework being the three features of genotype, phenotype, and environment, and the three key elements of the interaction of those, namely hereditability of fitness, transmitting the information, phenotypic variation, which is having a diverse, broad, different set of ideas, and finally, the ability to test those ideas with reality or with the environment. So next, by way of review, we also talked about Leonardo da Vinci as a true convergence of science and art. That's a big theme for this course. And we want to achieve that mindset as much as possible and get that kind of experience. But he was always curious, and he was seeing more in the reality around him. That's one important reason why we read literature and art is nonfiction, or how should I say, just seeing the reality has a certain surface element to it. But we want to analyze more deeply behind the surface. And so these are skills and mindsets that are very important. The artistic mindset, to see more, to imagine what's behind what is obvious to you. And thinking bigger, he was very ambitious and making many connections between different areas, as we saw or will see with the Mona Lisa, embracing paradox, different ideas at the same time. And we will discuss that in action when we talk about the waves triplet number 2 in the second part of the lecture. And courageous action, courage being extremely important. And a major theme of Waves, the book, is also about courage that we'll talk about. So the Mona Lisa, as we mentioned, has this fascinating quality of the smile. If you look straight at it, it is a strange smile. If you look away, it is very pleasant and inviting you to look back. And then you look back and the smile kind of changes. And this was based certainly attributed to genius, but also basically integrating science of vision that Leonardo da Vinci understood very well with, of course, the artistic expression. And he was a very gifted and dedicated anatomist in trying to understand how the body worked, how it was structured, and how it worked. And that was implemented in this one aspect of the Mona Lisa, many other innovations as well. So I wanted to just summarize some key lessons from innovation and invention from Leonardo da Vinci. One is, again, to be relentlessly curious, to seek knowledge for its own sake. All of you were studying in high school to get into digits. You were studying for passing that exam. I will tell you very straight that that is not the mindset that is necessary for you to innovate. If you're only learning the knowledge because you want to pass an exam and get to the next level, or if you're only going to a hagwon because you think that's going to help you on that exam and get to the next level, it will be very difficult with that mindset to innovate. So I know this is not easy, because most of your life, you're young, has been spent with this mindset. So you need to figure out a way to seek knowledge for its own sake, not for some specific immediate practical or tangible goal, like an entrance exam to college. It's one of the reasons why we're reading Waves. If you haven't read it yet, because you're not going to get a grade necessarily if you read it or not, or you haven't read it because it's not necessary for you to get to the next level in your career, well, that's a mistake. Not because I think you should read Waves per se, but if you don't have that mindset of seeking knowledge for its own sake, new ideas, and being curious, then it's strange to be in this innovation class, because hopefully the goal is we can share some mindset for some key lesson to help you in your innovation future. To retain a childlike sense of wonder, we talked about that with Einstein, the sense of the mysterious. We will talk about this feeling in the Waves part of the lecture, the second half of this lecture, this childlike sense of wonder. What does that mean? We're going to explore that. Very important to observe, as I mentioned, to start with details, to see what's unseen, to be distracted, not necessarily always to focus on things. and to respect facts and science, as I mentioned. Not so there's this link between the reality and the imagination. Sometimes to procrastinate and let ideas develop. It's not always a good strategy, but innovation is not something that can always be expected to deliver on a certain deadline. Thinking visually is very important, and we're going to develop this concept as well in the waves discussion of thinking visually. Avoiding silos, to avoid being in one particular focused area. We mentioned this when it came to the fourth industrial revolution. Many technologies are converging. People who are able to make that convergence will be more successful in the future. Fantasy, create for yourself, not just for patrons, collaborate, make lists. Leonardo da Vinci made lots of lists, and taking notes, which he did a lot. So Michelangelo, as you mentioned, one of the aspects of him was the sense of challenge, external challenge with other artists, but perhaps more importantly, internalization of challenge. And this concept of taking the challenges, whether it be this marble for the David statue in Florence or the Sistine Chapel in the Vatican, he basically was competitive, but beyond competition. Now, why do I mention that? All of you are very competitive. You take the exam to get into digits and so forth. But it's a different sort of competition. This is this differential fitness aspect, competing against reality. How can we make something better? How can we discover something new, push our limits of knowledge about reality, and fit new ideas and new products and new concepts into that reality? It's that type of competition. So there's not really always a defined competition like an exam, but an undefined competition. And that's very strange. Again, if you want to make the progression from high school student, college student in that mindset of defined competition, it's unlikely that you will be as innovative as you would want, because innovation doesn't occur in these defined competitions. It occurs in a undefined competition. Not that it's not real, but it's not this test or race or something like that, where you know what the goal is, you know what the score is. So be able to be competitive, but in this less defined framework is very important. And Michelangelo's, one of my favorite quotes is "Ancora imparo," and I think that's an important lesson for us, the lesson of always learning. So now let's move to innovation in Korea. We will discuss 3 parts. One is some global comparisons and scales that have been used to compare Korea with other countries. And I know in Korea, we always like to compare with other countries because that's very important. Some countries actually don't care about that. And I would say that that's actually important because in a way, as I mentioned, if you are competing to be in a defined competition, you're not that competitive. But if you're competing in a open-minded way, that's where you get really competitive. But in any case, these are these scales, and we will discuss them and evaluate the meaning and implications. Second part of this lecture will be some history of innovation in Korea with some selected innovations. And the third part will be a focus on King Sejong, Sejong Daewang, that we will focus on that period of time. So 2 rankings of innovation. The first one is the Bloomberg ranking. Bloomberg is a financial news service. Most of you are probably familiar with that. And the second survey is the World Economic Forum. Some of you may also be familiar with that. So first, the Bloomberg ranking. And this was last year based on 2018 data. And the most innovative countries are, number 1 is South Korea. And second is Sweden, and then Singapore and Germany and so forth. So this was based on data sources, including the World Bank, the IMF, and the OECD. And you might say, that's great. We're the best. Let's finish. We don't have anything more to talk about. But it's very important to understand the nature of these surveys. So they looked at 7 criteria: R&D intensity, manufacturing value add, productivity, high-tech density, tertiary education, research concentration, patent activity. And in a way, similar to what the 2 students mentioned earlier, they look at the results. They see some products, they see the patents, they see the research money. They looked a little bit at the results and use that as a measure of innovation. There are essentially 2 ways we can measure innovation, and later lecture we'll study this in more detail. One is to look at the results and to see all the different new products and new services, new things. And the other one is to look at the process and the culture and process to create that innovation. So I'm simplifying a little bit, but this ranking is looking a little bit at these results. Now, it turns out, actually, that if you were to design a survey specifically to make South Korea look good, this would be a very good survey, because actually South Korea does very well in many of these areas. In particular, Samsung has focused a lot on these things like manufacturing value add, R&D dollars, high-tech density, and patent activity. And if you look into the detail of these numbers, this almost talks about Samsung as a major component of this innovation ranking. Another aspect, of course, is that tertiary education or college education, university education is very common in Korea. Everybody gets an undergraduate degree. It's for, many people do, many young people. So that has some benefits, obviously, and it looks good on the innovation ranking. It also has some challenges as well. If you have young people who have college degrees and they don't have jobs and so forth, it can become a big problem. So let's look at a second ranking. The second ranking is the World Economic Forum ranking of the 10 most innovative economies in the Global Competitiveness Report. So it's not exactly focused directly on innovation, but more on global competitiveness, but they interpret this as being innovation. And as I said, innovation is very central to success, personal success, career success, company success. So global competitiveness is based very strongly on innovation. And in this top 10 in a list, which is the same year, South Korea is not even on the list. Switzerland is number 1, United States is number 2, Israel is number 3, Finland is number 4. On the previous list, the Bloomberg, United States was not on the list. This one, the United States is number 2. So you can see that these rankings are not always, they're not like some sort of law or some sort of a truth given by God or whatever, by a textbook. They are different types of surveys based on different sorts of numbers with different interpretations. So this is extremely important because it's very difficult to measure innovation. And I know many people looked at the first Bloomberg report and they said, oh, South Korea is the best. That's great. And they're very happy and complacent. And the irony of that is that as soon as you feel like you're the best, that's usually the best way to not be innovative, because innovation is about continuously improving. So if you think the best, why improve, right? So these are very complicated and dangerous sort of surveys. On the other hand, if it doesn't reflect what you feel is a correct assessment, that can also be a challenge. So let's look at this in a little bit more detail. Again, the World Economic Forum, and they looked at 12 pillars of competitiveness. all the way from institutions, infrastructure, macroeconomic, health, and primary education, not just tertiary education, higher education and training, various market efficiencies, financial market development, technological readiness, market size, business sophistication, and a more confined category of innovation. And so Korea actually was number 26, which sounds bad, but I mean, they ranked 137 countries, but it's not, that great, certainly not number one. And Korea is very strong in infrastructure. So if we look at the internet, we look at the roads, we look at the public transportation, I think Korea is one of the best in that regard. But other areas such as labor markets and financial markets were actually quite low. And so all of these come together as number 26. Now let's focus a little bit about financial market development. As we'll talk about later in the course, venture capital, which is financing for early ideas and very closely related to innovation and startups. The venture capital market is very poorly developed in Korea. And so you have creative ideas, but they're not able to get the financing to move to global impact. And this is very common in Korea. And the venture capital development is not just about money, it's about a certain mindset about how to finance and move forward investments. We will talk about this in more detail. So these are not just imagined difficulties. I think these are very real difficulties. And I think actually government is aware of these, but there may not be necessarily that much interest in changing them. So for example, with labor market efficiencies, there are aspects of social and cultural aspects that might be balanced in terms of people working, in terms of unions, in terms of tradition, in terms of history. These are not things that can necessarily be easily changed. So there may be very good aspects to Innovation Korea and aspects that are not, very strong. So the biggest problems were noted: political instability. I think we see this very common. I saw this. I've been in Korea for 10 years. So I was here with the Lee Myung-bak, I was here with Park Geun-hye, and I'm here with Moon Jae-in. And you can see, I've seen total projects changing just because of the changing government. So no one can really feel comfortable moving forward on a long-term sort of plan. And innovation is not just about pali-pali or just doing things fresh and new every day. Innovation requires some sustained stability, actually, to make these ideas into reality. So that policy instability, I agree, can be a challenge. Typically, also in companies, every company in Korea, including Digist, for example, will change all the staff every year. They all move to another department, move to another office. And there are actually technical reasons for that, smart reasons. They don't want corruption to happen. So if you move people from office to office every year, there's a kind of newness. They can't get into sort of fix things and do some bad things through controlling accounts or whatever it may be. So it's a kind of prevention against corruption. On the other hand, all these changes every year create the instability that's not conducive, does not support long-term projects. We mentioned about financing and venture capital. That's a big problem. Inefficient government bureaucracy. I actually think the government bureaucracy in Korea is quite efficient. The problem here is there's too much government reporting. So if you're a startup and you get a government grant, you will spend most of your time not making an innovative product. You'll spend most of your time doing talking with the government people, making them happy and making them feel like you're doing work and showing that you're doing work and doing a lot of reports for the government. I've seen this very clearly. And I think they don't always realize that all these come together, all these different grants, and the startup is not doing anything innovative. They're just filling out the government reports. And that's a big problem. So, and then we talked about labor regulations. Now, you might feel a little bit upset. You might say, well, why is this professor telling us all the negative things about Korean innovation? We are very innovative. We had 2 students that said we're innovative. The Bloomberg said we're #1. Why do we bother talking about these negative things? Why is the professor talking about this? And this is actually a very deep issue in Korea. Is not always easy to make some critical comment or to point out areas that can be improved. In fact, in Korean law, if you say something bad about somebody, you know, even if it's true, they could sue you, and it's a very dangerous thing to be negative about things. And a lot of the culture is around positive feelings and harmony, etc. And all of this is very good, and has some benefits. But innovation is fundamentally about making improvements. Innovation is fundamentally about moving away from an existing situation to another situation, and in principle, a better situation. So if it is impossible to criticize, if it is uncomfortable to criticize, if it is illegal to criticize, that's going to have effects on innovation. So it is in that spirit that I'm making these comments, because if Korea really wants to be in a sustained way, and if you want to be in a sustained way, innovative in the future, and you want to do your startup, you want to do your idea, you need to be thinking about these difficulties, and perhaps maybe not fixing them all, because these are big issues, but the policy instability, the access to financing, the excessive government bureaucracy, the restrictive label regulations. I mean, these are going to be issues that you have to be aware of. And ultimately, government policy and other people have to be thinking about that if they are honest and true to concept of innovation. So that's why we talk about the biggest problems. We could spend all day talking about all the great things. We have, best smartphones, best TV, best COVID response. So everything is wonderful. And now we can go to sleep and we don't have to worry about it. As you can imagine, this comfortable, self-satisfied feeling is not going to be good for innovation. We have to be, in a way, uncomfortable and looking for new and better things. So let's go back to the question. What do you think? Is Korea one of the most innovative countries in the world? Let's go to Kim Min-ung. Or Kim Min-ung? I can't read that. Yeah, what do you think?
I think Korea is innovative country.
Okay, a little bit more 소리가 조금 더 I can't hear you.
Hello?
Yes. So what do you think?
I think Korea is an innovative country.
Okay.
Uh, because Korea,
Not so, yeah.
Korea doesn't have fundamental resources.
Mm.
People's
Right. So there's been a lot of discussion about the fact that not a lot of natural resources, so they have to develop value other ways.
Oh, yes.
Right. So that's very good, because actually this kind of pressure is very important in innovation. We'll talk about this sort of aspect. Thank you for that. One more student. How about Chokje? Chokje, what do you think?
I think Korea is one of the most innovative country in this world because we our economy or our countries, a lot of technologies have developed in very short time.
Yes.
We were in 20th century, we were a very poor country. We had a war, but now we are one of the most leading one of leading countries in this world. So I think it's based on innovative thoughts.
Great. Thank you very much, Chokje. So let's continue. Now I want to just go over some selected innovations in Korean history. Most of you, of course, are familiar with these, and some of these are actually still in use today. So I'm going to go over 6 of these very briefly. One is the heated greenhouse. So I don't know how much you've traveled around the world, but I've traveled a lot in Europe, Asia, and North America. And one of the things that struck me when I was traveling was that there was a lot of greenhouses, or little houses, if you will, with the plastic in Korean farms as compared to other places. Now, other places also have these, but it's very common in Korea. And I think it's an adaptation to the certain climate aspects in order to increase the agricultural output relative to soil quality, mountainous terrain, and different temperatures during the seasons and so forth. The interesting thing is that this heated greenhouse was developed in the 15th century. And so this is a very long-standing innovation in Korean history. The second one is the rain gauge developed by Jang the Chikyugi, related to these environmental challenges of trying to maximize the agricultural output. It was very important to track how much rain was accumulated and find patterns and so forth. And that was an innovation also developed during the time of King Sejong. As we'll talk about shortly, and many of you are familiar with this history, is that there was a very intense period of innovation during that King Sejong period, similar to what Florence experienced, as we mentioned in the last lecture, and the Roman innovation as well. And so innovation mindset or innovation capability is not always constant throughout a society over a long period of time. A third very ingenious innovation, invention. The other thing I should also emphasize, why I call these innovations, is they were widely distributed throughout Korea. So as I mentioned, the greenhouse has been widely distributed. Obviously, it's still a main feature of farms in Korea, and have also the rain gauge as well, the chikgugi, throughout. More of an invention, and maybe not as widely distributed, but certainly an innovation in some sense, was the mechanical water clock by Jang Yeong-sil, who we're going to talk about, using hydromechanical system to both tell the time as well as to announce the time as well. Probably the most important innovation is that of Hangul. And as we know, in 2 weeks or 3 weeks, we're going to celebrate Hangul Day. And as far as I know, I think Korea is the only country, major country, that actually has a celebration about its language, or its alphabet, I should say, its writing script. So Hangul is extremely important innovation because it became an enabling innovation. And it's no accident that Hangul was also developed and implemented during that King Sejong period, which, as I mentioned, created a lot of innovations. So we're going to talk a little bit more about Hangul in the next slide. A fifth innovation, which I would argue is not exactly an innovation because it wasn't widely distributed, was a movable type. We were talking about the Gutenberg printing press and how that became a critical innovation, enabling innovation in Western and global cultures. The printing and movable type of the Korean and Chinese variety were less widely distributed. So we can call them remarkable inventions, but perhaps not innovations in that regard. On the other hand, ondo, or underfloor heating, is my personal favorite innovation because, of course, everyone uses that here, and it's a great way to heat homes. And of course, that was implemented in Korea thousands of years ago, some believe, as well. So that was a very early innovation. So these are some selected innovations. And as I mentioned, many of these, in particular, the chikgugi, the mechanical water clock, and Hangul, were actually developed during King Sejong's reign. So all of you are familiar, of course, with Sejong Daewang. This is his statue in Gwanghwamun Square in Seoul, 1418 to 1450. Now, there were three features in his period that I believe were critical to encouraging innovation, because I think it's very important to study, just like we did Rome and Florence and so forth, but to study in the past, what were some of the features of innovation? One of them was breaking class barriers. So like any society, Korea, India, Europe, in any society, there's often classes, higher class, lower class, etc. That's been a reality of human existence for as long as we know. And he did a number of measures, including Hangul, which we'll talk about, that broke these class barriers. Second one was a meritocracy, somewhat based on the Chinese system, but he implemented the concept of, expanded the concept of using exams to get into certain civil service positions, and in general, increased that part of society so that people could advance and get to high position through their talent and their abilities, and not because of their class. So in some ways, 1 and 2 are related. And finally, and most importantly, he created the context for the dissemination of knowledge, whether they be the libraries or the scholars that he encouraged, but most importantly, the development of the Hangul language to disseminate ideas and spread them around, and to make this dissemination, written language, widely available in the population. So of course, number 3, dissemination of knowledge, is also related to number 1 as well, because the language, the written language, was not limited just to elite people, but was widely distributed. And so Hangul was extremely important to this. We call that kind of enabling innovation. We talked about evolution in biology and the three elements: hereditability of fitness, phenotypic variation, and differential fitness. The hereditability of the information, to be able to pass ideas along and share ideas and exchange ideas and mix ideas, that's extremely important. And that's what this dissemination of knowledge and what Hangul helped accomplish. Now, of course, one of the top figures in this whole innovation flowering was Jang Yeong-sil, who was one of King Sejong's scientists, as you know. So one can say the Korean Leonardo da Vinci. And he was born as a peasant. He wasn't in the higher classes. So again, if King Sejong hadn't broken down these class barriers, then someone like Jang Yeong-sil would not have been able to accomplish those innovations. And the same actually was very true with Leonardo da Vinci and in Florence, is that we talked about Florence as following the plague, where about 40% to 50% of the people died in that city. That created a lot of opening that this necessarily broke down established class barriers. There was a big tragedy, of course, many people dying, but that kind of changes upset the established levels to enable somebody like Leonardo da Vinci, who wasn't peasant born but wasn't in the high class, to be able to accomplish what he was working on. And same for Jang Yeong-sil. The other aspect, as you know, he was involved with the Jipyeon-juns, which were these libraries and organizations of people to share ideas, again, established by King Sejong. And he had many discoveries and many inventions and many innovations. The astronomical instruments, the printing press, the iron printing press, the water clock we talked about, sundial, various weaponries, and then the rain gauge and the water gauge, as we mentioned. Now, what's interesting is, and many of you know the story, is that even though this period in King Sejong's reign was very innovative, certain characteristics could not be overcome. And one of those was an essential resistance of people to somebody who's different and special. And so the story is that Jang Yeong-sil had made some invention that had injured the emperor, some sort of special chair, and his enemies that were jealous of his accomplishments basically blamed him and got him out of that position and banished. And so this is a classic story of Korean drama, and a lot of people love Korean dramas and all those jealousies and all those games people play so that they conform or they stay comfortable or other people don't attack them, and all these sorts of dramas, which are very exciting and very interesting. And K-drama is all over Asia and so on and so forth. But a lot of these dramas are fundamentally inhibitory to innovation. So just keep that in mind. If you're at a company or you're doing some work in science and you're trying to be innovative, and you're involved in so many dramas and you're thinking about what other people are thinking all the time, and that's the Korean way, then you have to be thinking you're not going to be that innovative and it's going to be a dead end. So this is a very interesting story to study. How was this period of time so innovative, but then how did it end? In your education, you often learn about King Sejong and how it was a great time and all sorts of wonderful things happened. But I think that the more important lessons come from how it ended and how the period of innovation stopped. Now, this is not just in Korea, but you know, for example, the Dark Ages in Europe after the Roman Empire fell were not innovative times. That's why they call them Dark Ages. So society goes in ups and downs. We had 4 students today say Korea is one of the most innovative, but could it go down? Could it become not so innovative? Could things change? These are important questions. And fundamentally, the answer is yes, because life goes in waves. That's one of the themes of the book that we're studying. There are ups and downs to civilization. There are ups and downs to nations. There are ups and downs to individuals. That's just the way the world is. So if we really want to be innovative, we have to be aware of these negative sides and try to improve. So that's what we were, just an overview of innovation in Korea, historically and at the present. Just a closing thought. This is actually from Christopher Columbus. You can never cross the ocean until you have the courage to lose sight of the shore. So I'll tell you a little story. I used to work at Samsung. I was there for 4.5 years at the Chongnap Kisilwon, Samsung Advanced Institute of Science and Technology, Central Corporate Research Lab. And so I'm familiar with the Samsung story, and we give a lot of speeches about Samsung and so forth. And this is the Burj Khalifa in Dubai, tallest building in the world, a engineering marvel. This Burj Khalifa was built by Samsung. And we think that, you know, that's the best building or one of the top buildings. It's very amazing. But that didn't just happen on its own. It began in the early 1980s, and Samsung wasn't building fancy buildings like this. It was building oil storage facilities in Libya in 1981. So Libya in 1981 was not a very easy place to work. It was a very dangerous place. Muammar Gaddafi, who was a terrorist leader, was there, and to make it more complicated, the Americans were bombing. Ronald Reagan wasn't happy with Gaddafi. You know, a lot of bad stuff happening there. But the Samsung engineers, they went out to do that. They had the courage to seek that out and to work in the hot environment, the dangerous environment. And of course, eventually they didn't stick with building those oil storage facilities. They eventually moved to this building. So the Burj Khalifa. So I guess my point is that type of courage and that type of desire for improving, etc., that's a mindset. And do we have that now? Do you think there are Koreans that would want to do that necessarily now? And so these are both open questions in terms of, you know, what it takes to be innovative, like Christopher Columbus, and, you know, what was it like in the past? What is it like now? How does society go up and down over the course? And innovation is a common thread in this. So in the second half, after a break, we will continue with waves, and we will talk about triplet number 3, and the discussion questions are in the Google Calendar, as you know, and we'll go through those discussion questions as a way of discussing the book. So any questions? 질문 있습니까?